Welcome to the presentation on strength training, and within this recording the first thing to do really is to identify the different ways in which we can train, and I'm going to introduce you to two slightly different concepts of resistance training, and I will go on later on in the video to describe resistance training in a little bit more detail. But here we have an example of what we might refer to as a multi-gym, which I'm definitely going to spell correctly by putting an I on the end of multi. We have the example of multi-gym, or resistance machines might be another way of describing that. And then we've got the idea of free weights. Both of those things combined, and certainly as we get more experienced, more heavily relying on free weights as the development method, are examples of resistance training. So I'm going to kind of look at those concepts in a little bit of detail later on. We've also got here the idea of circuit training, which again is a form of interval training, and I've got interval training just here. These training methods, particularly circuit, are interesting because they allow kind of like a whole body strength development session and allow you to focus your sessions not only on particular muscle groups and activities and movements, but also on things like specific energy systems. And finally over here, we've got the idea of plyometrics training. And I would also kind of incorporate into that the idea of SAQs, or speed, agility and quickness training. Now this one I'm not going to talk about in great deal in this particular recording because I've already got another recording which talks about that in itself, so I'm going to kind of leave that to one side, at least for the purposes of this particular recording. So the first thing I suppose we need to do is we need to understand the main concepts in strength training. What are the main sort of terminologies? What are the main ideas? What do we need to understand first and foremost before we can start applying these ideas to structuring training? Well, the first one, without question, is the idea of a rep, or reps. Now you will have heard, I've no doubt, the idea of reps described with regard to weight training, gym-based training, resistance training, and what we really mean is we mean the number of repeated exercises, So let's assume we're doing something like a series of biceps curls, for example. If we were to do 10 lifts on our right biceps, say, that would be a description of 10 reps, 10 repetitions. So that's what we mean by rep. It's one single complete action or lift. Okay, so that's what we mean by that. So there's our reps. When we bundle those reps together, we actually form something called a set. So how would you describe or define this concept of a set? And in our kind of exam speak, I want you to be aware that we've got effectively got the number of reps, but we have to add to that plus a recovery period. So let's say, for example, we are doing 10 repetitions on our bicep curl and we then have a minute's recovery. That would be one set. And if we repeated that series of actions 3 times, we do 3 sets of 10 repetitions with 1 minute recovery period. So a set is not just the number of reps, but incorporates the recovery period too. And that's an important distinction to make and will help us out later when we start to have a look at sort of the concept of frequency, intensity and time. Perhaps the most obvious thing to think about with regard to resistance training is resistance. Okay, what is it that's actually causing the resistance to the muscular contraction? What are we applying a force against? So really, we tend to measure resistance as a percentage of 1 rep max, a percentage of what is our maximum lifting potential within that particular exercise. And that brings me on to my very